When it comes to the conflict between Palestine and Israel, I often observe one side making the point, look at the atrocities of October the 7th, while the other side then usually responds with October the 7th was not the beginning. You have to look at the prior history of that event, and you have to see what caused October the 7th. Now, this is just an example for a type of argument exchange that is observable all across the space, and I see to be futile and basically pointless, and an expression of a dynamics of which I believe the participants are oftentimes themselves not really aware of. Why, for example, is the argument October the 7th was not the beginning not convincing? Those who utter it usually are of the conviction that they are making a very deep point and that they are scoring points against their opponents, while the other side doesn't seem to be very convinced by it. Why is this type of argumentation not something that will bring us anywhere, and particularly not together? Well, I believe it's the same with most of these arguments. To see whether they are convincing, all you have to do is try to universalize them and ask the question, would they convince me if I weren't me? Imagine, for example, Russia making the point that February, I don't know what it was, the 22nd or whatever, so the time of invasion was actually preceded by causes which made the invasion inevitable. So it's not a beginning point. The act of invasion is not invasion, which was an expression of choice and an expression of Russia's own decisions, but it was something that was necessitated, that was basically forced upon Russia by its own environment. This is the mirrored argument of the point being made that October the 7th was not the beginning. It also reduces a significant event down to circumstances, and there is nothing else remaining resembling responsibility and actual choices having been made where other choices could have been taken. There is nothing left for a responsibility towards the world of making choices which integrate the world and take the world into account. It is as if the situation had to happen this way and in no other possible way. So the moment you universalize it, such points, you start seeing they are not convincing unless you are you and already believing in a specific narrative and already having taken a specific side. And this is something we can observe quite often in these spaces. So what seems to be happening is that people are not getting anywhere. Those are not really arguments that could ever convince anybody who is truly of a different opinion. But those seem to be arguments which are built to serve as rhetoric tools, to make rhetoric points, to get other people to change their opinion for the wrong reasons. Because you can change your opinion for the wrong reasons, and you can choose a certain side for the wrong reasons. The starting point for all of these arguments is that a basic warlike situation is accepted, that there is a good side, there is a bad side. And all that remains to be done is to figure out ways how to sway participants to either the one side or the other side. And there are endlessly many different tactics how you can achieve that. Most of them have nothing to do with reason, although it gets really interesting when they try to pretend that they are an expression of reason, because this is something that's happening as well. Many of the arguments being made, particularly in the social new media spaces, portray themselves as being reasonable, as being argumentative, as having a point, as being the result of reflection and something that has science behind its own back. Usually they don't. Usually they are rhetoric tricks like the aforementioned, and they serve nothing else but narrative warfare, where you're basically trying to trick the opponent into believing that they have good reasons for changing their positions. This won't get us into a future because it assumes a warlike situation in which you can have a winner and a loser. And this has worked in the past because you could simply win a war in the past. But in our present day times, there's just no version in which this seems to be workable, particularly not on a global level. Just imagine yourself all Christians becoming atheists. I mean, if we were to really be consequential about this and really serious about this warlike attitude, It's just absurd to even think about all Christians being changed and converted into atheism. It's just the opposite, would be just absurd. Whether we like it or not, if we want to go into the future together, we have to figure out a way to live with those differences and to find a way of still being able to communicate with each other and still being able to feel some form of rapport with each other across those differences. So the crucial question here would be if we wanted to get anywhere. Instead of making such linear points, which are basically ad hoc, right? You can instead of arguing, well, it was not October the 7th and you can take any other date, and to that date any other opponent can respond, but the actual reason for why this date was not the actual causative factor for the whole situation is look at something different. And you can come up with endlessly many external explanations while never touching anything resembling, as I already said, like responsibility and choices and self-identity. You would ever end up in an endless number of linear stories that all of them cohere to a certain degree, like Christianity. Christianity coheres to a certain degree, but all of them have also breaking points. Whether you like it or not, they are incomplete. This is something that Wilber has been always pointing out. Whenever you have a story, it is by virtue of being a story linear and limited. It has breaking points. It cannot cover all contexts of reality and all dimensions of reality at once. And this is something very easy to point out. You can point this out about every single narrative, that they always have limitations and they always leave something out. But you can come up with an endless number of linear narratives that supposedly support your position. And if people find joy in this kind of game, well, I can't stop them from playing it, but they should be aware of the consequences of it, which is that this kind of game is alienating people from each other. And it's not something that's particularly beautiful, particularly if you compare it to what human minds and human consciousness has actually been able in human history to bring forth, to the artworks that have been created by human minds, to the music that has been created by human minds, even but the philosophical systems that have been created by human minds. All of those are incomparably more complex and more beautiful than these relatively linear war games that we're playing. The alternative would be not to ask the question, what was the beginning of the entire conflict, and try to reduce it down to one factor, but to ask the other side, what is it that I could sacrifice so that we could both have a future together? This is a very, very simple human-to-human question, which is pragmatically answerable. I don't think we'll ever find one story to fully encompass and to fully grasp the conflict between Israel and Palestine. It's all in all of its complexity, in all of its dimensions, in such a way that all sides could agree. But it is still possible for human beings to meet human beings and ask this very, very simple question, leaving your social identity behind and leaving the convictions that you have about what is good and what is bad in absolutist terms aside for a moment. What is it that I could sacrifice so that we could both have a future together? This is a different starting point, and it's a very different language game that people will be playing, which is a much more we-space-oriented language game and interested in creating a connection between people and building a connection between people from which a new form of culture can actually be born. And as long as we don't do that, the hitherto existing cultural modes, but by which I mean general narratives, are not capable of bringing us into the future. And this is something that I believe we have seen clearly enough. And just repeating the points and shouting them more loudly won't solve that.